And we set up this may have been more important than we realized at the time, we set up a regular monitoring so that every patient who was on the creon and on the diet was seen every 2 months and carefully weighed and measured, because up to then they had what you'd call a firefighting system. They would see a patient, treat them in hospital for as long as possible to get the money from the government, and then send them home, and then when the patient was sick again, they would bring themselves back. The family would bring them back, but they didn't have a regular outpatients. It wasn't part of their thinking. So we set up outpatients, we set up monitoring, and we gave enzymes. And that was how we did it. And what I want to show you is a little bit of data which we took the children in the Moscow clinic who were aged between their 10th and 11th birthday at any time over the 3 years of the project. So if a child was just 10, they would be included, but when we finished at the end of 3 years, obviously we had the children who'd only been 7 years old when we, does that make sense? We measured them at a point around when they were aged 10 and a half. And we did exactly the same with our Southampton children. So there were about 12, 15 children in each group. So what I'd like to do is just show the first graph. That's not right. Now, this is stylized, but the idea is that you have well-being this way, and we gave a well-being score which was actually generated around the Russian clinic, and we said 100% well-being is if they are going to school, they're missing effectively no school. We allowed them to go to the clinic 3 or 4 times a year to have that day off, but they were well enough to go to school, they were taking sporting activities, their family were not interrupted. And our 11-year-olds on this score came out at about 92%. In other words, in an English clinic, healthy children in a good CF clinic are basically very well. There were obviously 1 or 2 that were 100%, and there were 1 or 2 worse off, so the average was there. But anyway, this was how we were proud of this, and probably it isn't very much better even now. In Russia, they had the well-being of the 11-year-olds was terrible. I mean, you know, they weren't surviving, and they were very poor, and they tended to die. And the cost, ours was on about $15,000 a year. The Russians had virtually no money except what was being run, which would have been the same money that was available for pneumonia or any other hospitalized child. In other words, there was nothing for CF. Now the question we had, that was what we were trying to do with Solvay, and we were trying to get something out of Solvay. We wanted the enzymes, but what we said in return to Solvay is, we'll try and show you what a good enzyme can do. And the question was, if you don't pay $15,000, but you only pay $1,000 or $2,000, what is the shape of the well-being graph? Now it could be that if you spend $5,000, it's not much better than nothing, and that you have to go all the way up to here before you get a benefit from your money. Now that would be very important to know. It could be that it's a straight line, that your well-being would go up to about 25% on $5,000 and 75 on 10, and then you would know. But supposing you get a huge benefit for a little money. So we did it, and at the end of the time we did our audit. Can I have the next slide? Okay, and look, that was actually just over $1,000, and we were right up here. Fantastic, because you were now getting 11-year-olds, and we'd only started when they were 7, because there was a rapid deterioration in these children in those, from 5 to 7. But here we were up here. So if we could now show the next graph, we've extrapolated, and this is actually important in the UK as well, and it's important for many other conditions, maybe apart from CF. A little bit of money goes a long way. A lot more money is a diminishing return. So paying $15,000, you get that. But supposing in England we said, let's spend another $15,000 on every patient. Where does this graph go there? supposing we said, well, every patient should have DNAs and every patient should have gene therapy, it'll go up, but it'll only go up another 0.5%. So spending more and more and more is giving you a tiny benefit, whereas spending a little gives you a huge benefit. And I think this is an important, I mean, it's important for us in our own country, it's important when looking at expensive things, but in CF, this graph was something which we used to convince the Minister of Health in Moscow that, you know, forget the argument. Don't say, oh, we can never look after CF, it costs this much. If you give us this much, it's almost as good. If you give us this much, it's almost as good. But what we want is just to get it somewhere on the curve here. That's fine. Sorry?
What part of that cost scenario does the enzyme play?
The enzyme was most of that. This was, oh, I mean, at the time we did the first bit of it, we got the enzyme free, but we put in the cost. And we did it because we were negotiating then with Solvay. We had this problem with the Russian government. We got the tax off, and we did a deal with Solvay that they would give it to us at manufacturing cost rather than, you know, so it was a reduced prion, and it was at manufacturing cost, and we had discussions whether we could get it without the packaging even, because the packaging is expensive. But this was, I mean, this is, as I said, stylized, but the point was that most of this cost was, because as I said, we didn't do much else.
So if I interpret what you're saying correctly, if we forget Russia and drew that curve purely for the UK, it would end up at that 98% point, but it would be pushed out this way because the enzyme would be proportionately more costly.
Yeah, I mean, you'd go across, yes, I mean, you push it slightly that way. But it was really just the principle that it's the, I mean, it's also important for us is, you know, do we double, I mean, suppose we said we've got $1 million for every patient. You're never going to quite reach the 100.
But if you were NICE, you know, National Institute for Clinical Excellence, you'd be saying, why don't we have that?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, that comes up, and there are a lot of people saying, look, why do we use DNAs and so on? Because it's marginal compared to being just here somewhere. Okay, next slide. So this was actually, Steve added this when he was tinkering with my graphs, but it's actually good. So you could say that up to here, you've got your maximum benefit. You know, if you've only got a little money, you don't put a little money in giving a few people in India an expensive treatment. I mean, obviously individuals that have their own money, that's a different issue, but if you're looking at grants or government, you're not talking about this diminishing return at all. What you want to do is to say, let's get the maximum benefit, and therefore the next stage is to say, well, what actually is in here? What is the thing that we want there? Okay, can we have the next one? Right. Now, this was something which was devised by the Russian team to present at a conference, and I've sort of adapted it a bit, and it would be adaptable for many things, not just CF. First of all, there's a kind of pyramid of cost-benefit. In other words, and if you put a reverse pyramid here, you could have the lowest cost going up to the highest cost, and what I'm going to do is to just show what you would get at the base of the pyramid, which is the lowest cost, and then it's the diminishing return. Can we have the next one? Okay. So supposing you haven't got any money, except the human resources that are there. Well, assuming at least you've made the diagnosis, because we can't, if you haven't made the diagnosis, we're not on the pyramid. But once you've made the diagnosis, and you've got a very poor community, well, you can at least do physiotherapy, because you can teach the parents that it's just physical activity. You can give dietary advice. And in India, dietary advice is very interesting because they have a much lower fat diet anyway, which is easier to digest. In a lot of India, particularly in the south, they're very happy to eat coconut oil as a main cooking oil, and coconut oil is made of two fats, and one of them doesn't need any enzymes. So if they cook with coconut oil, they're getting some fat benefit without needing any enzymes at all.